So one of the things that, as a Latina, this is not a stereotype. I need my hands to move, but the little thing doesn't work. So with one, I'm going to do the PowerPoint. The other one, I'm going to hold the microphone. Let's see how that goes, okay? So first of all, I just want to say thank you. And I mean it from the bottom of my heart. You know, as I was thinking about TED Talks and what an activist meant, the title of my collective conversation that I'm going to have with all of you is called My Journey to Love as an Activist. And this under the beautiful umbrella of curiosity and resistance. And what does that mean and how does that feel when we're talking about love? And when I say the word activist, I have to tell you that I get extremely emotional. One of the things that I don't hide anymore and I'm not ashamed of is my emotion. As raw, as strong as they come out. Because that is who I am and that is my truth. So when I think about an activist, I'm humbled. And I enter this conversation with all of you with tremendous humility of what this has meant for me in my life, starting as a activist in my early 20s and now being in my late 40s. And what has that meant? Specifically, because one of the things that I've said from the beginning, being a proud Latina, Hondureña, catracha, immigrant, being undocumented, having the green card that's actually pink, losing my Honduran citizenship because I wanted the right to vote in this country. Period. And seeing and believing and saying, can you see what I see when it comes to racism? Can you believe what I see when it comes to racism? Can you be curious with the possibility that what I'm saying is truth? In all forms of microaggressions, and I love that. Racism, if only it were this easy to spot. And how do we start dismantling it together? And this again, doing this work in a sea of whiteness. Because every single time that I stepped into a room in the skin that I'm in, who I represent and who I am, 4'11", by the way, proud of that. These are the spaces of whiteness that I have to step into and tell my truth. Tell my truth around kindergarten to prison pipeline of kids that look like me, that are black and brown and Native American. That's part of our truth. And then asking some really essential questions to the heart, to the love, and saying, if these kids were white, blue-eyed, and blonde, as a community, what would we be doing now? We would be outraged. There would be revolution in the streets. And why in the now? The statistics are just getting worse, folks. And the reality that it is a pipeline to prison for kids that are brown and black. And these are kids that look like me. And these are our babies. So what does it mean to step in white spaces and tell our truth in the skin that we're in? And I have to bring our elders. Because this work, when I'm thinking about activists and I think about these two men, no longer with us, and many of you know who they are. Dr. Robert Proudfoot, amazing education professor, the College of Education, University of Oregon, that taught some of the most amazing teachers that we have currently in our system. Dr. Dwight Sowers, both Native American, both in the battle, both activists, both dead. For some of them, they might say that racism killed them. Heart attack, cancer, internalized racism. They both took the time to love me. They both took the time to say, Carmen, how is it that you're doing the job back then? And from both of them, I learned the greatest lessons. So the conversation I'm having with all of you today is for our white colleagues, but most importantly, it's about that brown and black and person of color that's taking on this conversation with their heart and their love. And I'm just going to share with you some of the lessons that I've learned, some of them extremely hard. But Dr. Proudfoot and Dwight Sowers, in their loving essence, you know, that I came to the place, how could, I would say to myself, how could you not be mad about what's happening? And they would look at me with such love and say, it's about love. I didn't get it back then. Now I do, and I'm going to share that with all of you. But what they were trying to tell me is, Carmen, this is the fishbowl we're in this work, when we're trying to dismantle institutional racism and bring allies to the forefront so we can combat and we can actually be able to move forward. It says you need to create your own fishbowl. You need to be able to tell your truth with no shame, no blame, no judgment for yourself or for others. Because as an activist, I can tell you, we are so hard on ourselves. They talked about responsibility, and I'm like, yeah, I'll take that responsibility. But for them, responsibility was the ability that I had to respond to things. That's choice. Responsibility, the ability that we have to respond, to do or not to do, to love, to shame, to blame, to judge, to do the hammer approach, and I'll explain what that means. Or I have the responsibility, ability that I have to respond and say, I am going to be in my loving, and that does not mean that my truth is not going to be heard. What they saw back then was definitely a workaholic. That's my label. At all times. Sounds, okay, raise your hand, really. All of you? Yeah? But there was also an essence of the work that how I was doing it, as I was trying to bring people along to have a conversation, a courageous conversation about race with me. And this was, I am going to shame you, I'm going to judge you, I'm going to blame you, I want you to feel guilt. The essence of that work for me in my journey was that I was pointing a finger at you and three at myself. And this is what my elders were trying to tell me not to do. That in order to do this work, you know, it wasn't about judging, shaming, blaming, guilt, anger, confusion, alienation. Because we know that when we're talking about racism in all its forms, there's misinformation, missing history, biased history, stereotyping that we don't know collectively as a community. But where do we get the strength to be able to have those conversations honestly and lovingly? And it doesn't mean that we're not go through these processes. But as we go and birth through these processes, because it does bring all of this to both sides of the conversation, to both sides of the discourse. If we're being honest, where do we end up? And I remember doing this work, and I'm going to go with the hammer approach. Who has gone through the cultural competency, diversity, training, all the different labels? Raise your hand. Okay. And if you recall, who has been through you're white, I am going to hammer judgment, shame, and guilt, and I'm going to make you feel really guilty. Who's been through those? Honestly? Okay, did that, I confess. The second piece of that around doing this work and having these courageous conversations about race was about the kumbaya. Let's just do kumbaya and let's get along and let's move this conversation forward. Did that help? No. Then was the data. Look at the data. When I was talking about my heart, when I was presenting the data, because the data representing those babies that look like me. And there was no connection. And now, where I'm at in engaging these conversations, you know, it's really about being in my loving and engaging this conversation every single time I engage. I work in school districts. with principals, with superintendents, with teachers. I have to tell you that I have to be in my full loving to be able to engage these really courageous conversations, because racism does not only hurt people that look like me, it hurts all of us. So in this conversation, it has to be from the most essence of love. And trust me, 10 years ago, I would be like, yeah, right. The other piece that I have to bring forward is in the work as activists, within our activist community. I like this analogy of a train. Think about this train going uphill. There's people in front of it, there's people inside of it, there's people behind of it. What we used to do as activists was this shame, blame, and judgment, because, of course, it had to be only one way, the hammer approach. You had to be at the front. And if you were in the back or inside of it, inside the systems, outside the systems, we would shame because the strategies would not be the same. They would be different. They would look different. They would sound different. They would look different. My greatest learning is that everybody is valuable in the conversation. The people that will take that leadership and will break the wall or break down that door. The people inside that are having the whispering conversations. The people behind the train that are pushing silently without being known at the forefront. They're all valuable. The judgment, shame, blame, guilt, anger, confusion, alienation does not do us any good. Not anymore. Not in the now. So how do we come together also as activists and recognize the value that we all have in the work? Because we're combating, again, the misinformation, missing history, biased history, and a stereotyping that's present and that it's now and that we have. One of the things that my elders brought forth way back when that I did not, and I'm going to introduce this concept maybe to many of you, it's the spiritual suicide. Because what they said to me, if you continue doing this work out of anger, the only person that you're going to harm is yourself. Because you are going to internalize this so much that you're not going to be able to see or find yourself anymore inside of who you really are and what you can be and the message that you can deliver. Spiritual suicide, it is the killing of that part of oneself that is associated with the feelings and the mind, as well as the killing of real meaning or significance in one's life. If you're not doing work that is meaningful to you or being the person you were truly meant to be, then you are committing spiritual suicide. For all those young activists that are in this conversation in the now, please find your loving. Because I look at many of our elders that are not longer here with us. And I see many of our elders out there right now that I question if they're going to be with us in this physical world reality any longer with us. Because this work can kill you. As we internalize the lie, el mitote, the big myth of how this work needs to be done. And that is the path of liberation. And what is the balance that we need in order to do this work, whatever our passion, whatever our purpose is? What is the path of liberation that we want to follow, that we want to model? I have to tell you that I have had the fortune of being a role model for some younger Latinas. And now I've had to go back to them and I've said to them, I'm sorry I lied to you. Because this work need not be done in the way that you saw me doing it. This is what I have learned. Please change. What does it look like for your mental, your spiritual, your emotional, and your physical well-being? What does it feel like when it's in perfect balance of loving for yourself and for others? What does it sound like for you, and you're the only one that could be able to make that interpretation of what this work can look for you? This labyrinth, you are the creators. I know when I entered this labyrinth where I was. I'm still trying to journey out of it. But I can tell you that I'm in a place, and what does that mean? Of loving. What does that mean? For me, it's compassionate self-forgiveness. Compassionate self-forgiveness for myself and for others. What's the road you want to take? It's really up to each one and every single one of us. But what I'm assured of is that for me, if there's blame and shame as we're doing this work, it does not mean you're not going to feel it. But it does mean that in the skin that I'm in, as an ally, I'm going to be there to be able to take this journey with you. Not beat you up against it. I'm going to be there taking your hand and guiding this process with all the love that's available to me. One of my favorites, Paulo Freire said, "We must dare in the full sense of the word to speak of love without fear of being called ridiculous, mawkish, or unscientific, if not anti-scientific. We must dare in order to say scientifically and not as a mere blah, blah, blah that we study, we learn, we teach, we know with our entire body. We do all these things with feelings, with emotions, with wishes, with fear, with doubt, with passion, and also critical reasoning. However, we never study, learn, teach, or know with the last one only. We must dare so as never to dichotomize cognition and emotion. We can't separate ourselves. We can't cut ourselves from the true meaning of love and feeling. The good, the bad, and the ugly. We need to feel it. We need to be able to birth through it. And at the end of it, be able to be whole. So what is the greatest lessons that my elders, Dr. Robert Proudfoot, please, if you don't know him and you're part of this university, Google him, honor him. Dwight Sowers, looking at Mark Harris here. You know, how can we not cry for that amazing man and the things that he did for so many of us? The greatest lessons that they said to me is be fearless, be honest, be you. In this work, as an activist, humbly, humility, I say that because I still don't think I'm worthy of that word. They are, not me. My advice is, again, as we do this work with passion, whatever purpose you have, whatever journey you decide to take, be yourself, speak your truth, be fearless, be honest, be you. So thank you.